let's have a look at the newspapers for you. Start with the Mirror. It has the incredible outpouring of support from people paying their respects to the Queen as she lies in state.
And then there's the Express, I think, next. Leading on the vigil held by the Queen's 4 children, Charles, Edward, Andrew and Anne.
The Guardian covers the scandal over the plans by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to pay respects to the Queen, with the fiancé of the murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi calling it a stain on the monarch's memory.
The Times has the intensely moving picture of the, well, it doesn't actually, that's the Princess of Wales, the new Princess of Wales, meeting soldiers there, people in the armed forces.
Yes, there's the Daily Telegraph. It describes the royal outpouring of support to the Queen as a devotion to duty.
And the Mail, vigil for Mama. And it notes again that the time taking now to join that queue is allegedly going to be something like 25 hours. So we're full of warnings about the fact that the palace are now saying don't travel to join the queue because you probably won't make it.
And you've got to take that very, I mean, if you are not sort of young, fit and healthy, that may be a real problem. You don't want to be collapsing halfway through the queue or anything like that, which has happened to 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, and bear in mind, yesterday there was a queue to join the queue. So it could get silly, couldn't it?
Yeah, so just, I mean, think of yourself as well in all of this, you know, if you're really up for doing that, because it's a very, very long time.
Stay in and watch the telly, because we'll keep you up to date on everything.
Yeah. It's very true. Well, let's go through some of those papers with former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Good to see you both this morning. Kevin, let's start with the Mirror. Should we be looking at the vigil at 7:30 last night or just after?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a moment, obviously, for the 4 children to stand vigil. And it must have been incredible, actually, for members of the public, you know, who have queued, just been saying queued for anything up to 24 hours to come in at that precise moment, because it was quite a short window. I think it was only 20 minutes that they were standing vigil for. So to see the new king and the other members of the royal family within yards, you know, at that time, which was already a pretty awe-inspiring moment, must have just added to the sense of history, really. But yeah, I mean, I guess because we've not seen this for 70 years, probably no one realised that this was all part of the arrangements.
No.
So to see them standing vigil like that is, as I say, it's quite an incredible sight, isn't it?
I used the word brutal earlier. It struck me as I know that they agreed to do it, and the Queen would have agreed to all this as well, but it just seemed very medieval and brutal.
It does, and they've never been given time to grieve. And this is what I always find really difficult. Anybody that's suffered a loss, that moment that you are on your own, you know, I couldn't get out of bed when my mum had died 6 years ago. It was getting up in the morning and having to face the world. And that was bad enough for me, and I only had to leave my house and go to, the supermarket. But to face the general public, to face the world, to stand there, bowing your head, in front of everybody for your mother, I think you're right. Brutal, it does feel brutal. I know they're brought up in this kind of world. I know that they understand what their rules and regulations are surrounding the monarchy and what they're expected. But it's got to take the toll on them. I mean, I'm just in admiration.
Charles looked absolutely done in, as we would say.
Because I mean, this has been within a day, really, of his mum dying. He's been out
straight on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think there'll be a time when it'll happen.
I hope so.
Anne looks done in as well, actually, to be fair. She's strong, but done in.
Yes, and to see her getting some flowers, receiving flowers that were for her and her face, and I thought that was such a poignant moment that somebody recognised that she had also had a loss, but was still working incredibly hard, and she just looked so grateful.
Nevertheless, the picture on most of the front pages is about what we're about, isn't it? It's totally British, and it is strong and stiff upper lip, but whilst also being a family.
Yeah, and a lot of the people obviously in the queue are tourists who just happened to be here at this time. American, I think a lot of them, were fascinated by the whole British way of life. I mean, this isn't typical, but as you say, it is still a very British thing, really, and it's quite extraordinary.
Well, queuing is a very British thing. The Eye calling it, Claire, the Elizabeth line.
Yeah, see, I think they've missed out a chance to call it, line of duty, or many other puns also available. But it is quite fascinating that it has become a thing of its own right, the queue. And I've seen so many things on social media where people have called it's the next movie to come out. You can just imagine, it's the queue, it's the romantic relationships that are made in the queue, it's the friendships that are born from it, from what is an incredibly British pastime, the queue. And it seems to be very good-natured. And from friends of mine that have been there have said that actually that was part of the experience of all of this. This is the pit that's actually made it. I'm not sure that I could quite manage 24, 25 hours in a queue, especially with the weather being as it is at the moment. But
it's interesting. The Star have got that front page headline that says QE2. And I think that is brilliant, because you can't help thinking, just as you said, there will be a movie one day that's called that, The Queue, or QE2 or something, because this is a phenomenon, isn't it?
It is, and when you look at the logistics of the queue, I mean, it is quite a feat in itself. And it's the people coming over Lambeth Bridge, and Parliament is just in sight, and then they see there's the crocodile fencing that they then still have to queue around, and it's still another 2 or 3 hours from Lambeth Bridge to get into Westminster Hall. It's not a vast distance on foot. You can do it in 6 or 7 minutes, but 2 or 3 hours of queuing. People are outstanding. I am always amazed when you see things like this, and it makes you incredibly proud that people will do this and they want to show and share their respect.
Yeah, people who are suffering themselves with disabilities, or they've got very young children.
I don't know how they do it.
I know. I mean,
I've got to be honest, I don't know.
Like I said yesterday, there was an 85-year-old man in the queue. They're probably is older now by now.
Yeah.
But how on earth? And yet they do it. If that isn't British resolve, I don't know what is.
Well, absolutely, and not many opportunities for a cup of tea or a
toilet break.
Yes, which I always look at these days. These are my sort of requirements if I'm going somewhere.
And also glad to see that some people who might have actually used their celebrity or position in the world to slip in on the side actually did the long queue.
Well, hasn't that just put David Beckham into national hero category for doing that? 10 hours. That's stamina, and I respect him for that, and I think a lot of people will. There are some who jump the queue and have walked through, but no, fair play to him. I really admire that he stood there. Could you imagine, though, standing in the queue and then suddenly going, oh, you look a bit familiar.
Yes. He was wearing that flat cap sort of right down over his eyes, but yes, after queuing with him for 2 or 3 hours, you'd think, is that who I think it is?
Exactly. And I think
you would have to ask, wouldn't you?
You would have to ask.
You look really like David Beckham.
And there's no way you can escape from it, can he? He's not going to...
Can't move from the queue at that point.
No, it's lovely. I think that really is nice that he did that.
What is the King saying in the Times, Kevin?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. As we know, Charles has been quite political in the past, and he said that he will obviously be completely impartial going forward. He realises he can no longer campaign on the various things that are dear to his heart, but that doesn't stop him from expressing views privately. Now, he had a meeting yesterday with Mark Drakeford, who's the First Minister of Wales. Now, I don't know protocol-wise whether this is a breach of protocol or not, but Mark Drakeford has told another TV station afterwards about exactly what they spoke about, and
he shouldn't have done that, should he? Really?
Think so. No, I think that's right.
And it was the cost of living.
Well, yeah, a deeply political thing right now. I mean, I have to think fair play to him actually for being, in touch enough to be aware of it and to talk about his concerns, But yeah, he basically said that he was worried about the impact of the cost of living crisis and how that will impact on people here in Wales. He's concerned about how people will manage through what is going to be a difficult winter, according to Mark Drakeford. So yeah, I think it's an indication, leaving the protocol thing to one side, I think it's an indication that even though he's become monarch, he is still, I think, behind the scenes. He's not going to bite his lip. He is going to.
Well, but I mean, this is the thing with the monarch. They do raise these concerns in private meetings.
And it's not supposed to come out.
It's not supposed to come out.
Yeah.
No.
So yeah, I think maybe a breach of protocol, but at the same time, I think it is important, especially when, there's going to be a lot of pomp and ceremony, and there are going to be people saying, well, hang on a minute, this kind of jars a little bit with the cost of living crisis. If Charles can give a nod to the fact that he is aware of it and is concerned about it, I don't think that will do him any harm.
I think people will be really pleased.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't think it'll do him any harm at all.
That his concern hasn't faded just because he's been elevated.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting though, isn't it? I can't imagine many people being too annoyed. I mean, obviously this is costing money. Obviously it is, but it is for the Queen.
Yeah.
I mean, quite what happens, what it's like with the coronation, and whether that's going to be pared down.
Well, yeah, I think that's going to be, if it's still economically bad, and it might not be for another year. I think.
But that will be his choice. Do you think they will hold it off that long for Charles?
I think it'll certainly be into the spring. I don't think that you can go ahead with it right now. I think it's at least 6 months away before that will happen. I do wonder if it will be pared down, given that he has got this interest in the cost of living. He might look at it and look to start his reign as monarch with that kind of note and a paring down ceremony for the coronation.
I think it would be quite a nice touch.
Yeah, I do.
But especially after the hugeness of this.
Yeah.
There's no need for an enormous coronation. I don't know.
No.
No, I think the event in itself
It could be more religious, maybe. It could be contained.
Yeah, and I wonder if he will take that view that he can do this smaller and a much more religious moment for himself. But we'll wait and see. I think it'll be a very good move if he does.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I've been looking back onto Monday, Claire, and the funeral. The Guardian raising issues about Saudi Arabia's involvement. I mean, this is a diplomatic event as much as anything, and people don't really realise that.
It's not. I mean, this is a state funeral. The protocol will allow for heads of state, foreign heads of state, to come over. Now, there is some debate as to whether the Crown Prince is actually attending the funeral.
Yes, he may just be invited to certain receptions.
Absolutely, and those close to Mohammed bin Salman said that he doesn't like to attend an event where he is not at the centre of it.
Oh, right. Well,
that's
very
very
similar.
2 rows back. He may not wish to do that, but unfortunately, and as uncomfortable as this is, these people have to be invited. Now, whether they attend and how good the diplomatic corps of each country is remains to be seen.
I mean, who on earth is going to organise the seating arrangements?
Oh.
What a nightmare.
And we all know this from family events. You can't put so-and-so next to so-and-so. And there was some thought that these people would be brought in from their aeroplanes by bus, that they would all be transported on a coach together. And you can't imagine how that was ever going to work.
No.
Who would sit next to who would be in the same coach as someone else. So I think that it would be an advisable thing if he did remain away from it, but you cannot stop somebody coming if they are invited.
Not a country with whom we do have proper diplomatic.
We do, and this is
and we do.
And we do, and this is what I say. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable any of this is, and I don't take anything away from the fiance of Jamal Khashoggi, but it's also not for us to get involved. And I think this is where we all have an opinion on it, but it isn't our decision.
Yes, because this is a state funeral.
Yeah.
This isn't, as it were, a private funeral. This is a state funeral, so to a sense, it's political.
It's very political, yeah. I mean, the Foreign Office will have gone through the lists and will score out so-and-so, and, so you've got Russia and Belarus, they're not invited at all. You've got other countries where relations aren't great, they're invited, but only at ambassadorial level, so you're not having the head of state. So the Chinese invitation has been very controversial because they have taken action against, I think it's 7 parliamentarian sanctions against them. So you have Ian Duncan Smith saying, who is one of them? Why are they being invited at all, really? So you had the controversy yesterday when Lindsay Hoyle, the speaker, banned anyone from the Chinese party coming along. Oh, he didn't?
He didn't, and that was a really interesting thing. Ian Duncan Smith raised the concern about this, but the Speaker of the House of Commons isn't in charge of Westminster Hall. That falls under
That's Black
Lord
Rod, isn't
Speaker.
it?
Yes, so it's the Lord's property. So Lindsay actually hasn't banned anybody from doing anything, and this is the unfortunacy of it. It's all been blown up into a sort of great big out of proportion. The Foreign Office made the report. Ian Duncan Smith has taken it in a way that he's taken it, which isn't necessarily correct.
Talking of Black Rod, did you see there was a lovely clip that's gone all around the world now of an American reporter who's out on the queue interviewing people in the queue, and she got this nice gentleman and she was talking to him, and she said, "Is there any special reason you're here?" And he said, "Well, I used to just work over there." And he sort of pointed back towards Westminster, and she said, "Oh, what, did you actually work there?" And he said, "Yeah." She said, "What did you do?" And he said, "Well, I was Black Rod." And he's a former Black Rod.
Yeah,
And he was
yeah.
again just joined the queue.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes, well, that was my job. I was Black Rod there for about 5 years or something."
And
It's
he was
quite
saying,
well
he was
known.
explaining that when he was in the job, you know, part of his job was preparing
Oh, yeah.
for
Yes,
Yeah.
this.
plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he seemed like a lovely man, and he was just
He was
just in the
superb.
queue, wasn't he?
Yes, he
It was
is superb.
a lovely moment.
What's their
And
official
great.
title? Is it Gentleman Usher of Black Rod or something, of the Black Rod?
I think so. It is a
something like
longer.
that.
It is a
Should-
longer
should know that,
story.
Yes, well, we all should know that. And the funny thing was, he said to her, she said, "Oh, what's a Black Rod?"
That's
And he
right.
said,
Yeah.
and he explained, he said, "You have Black Rod." Oh, she was Australian. wasn't she?
Australia,
yeah.
the
He
Australian
said, "You have
part.
a Black Rod in Australia, you know." And she said, "No, I didn't know."
Yes, and he sort of sensed that.
It was a lovely conversation, and he was so nice and natural. Brilliant.
Gentleman Usher of the Black Rod.
Yes.
Gentleman.
that's
right.
Black
There you go.
Rod. Yeah. But we now have a lady Black Rod.
We do.
Yes.
So is she a gentleman?
No, she's a lady Usher of the Black
She's a
Rod.
lady
The
usher.
first one ever.
You've
Yeah.
got to get it right, haven't you?
Yes, we do.
We're all learning lots of new things, aren't we? Constitution.
Meanwhile, Kevin, we had the news breaking in the programme yesterday about the two police officers stabbed in Leicester Square.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, the focus, understandably, is on the Queen's death. I mean, this is a huge story, really. I mean, it just, again, shows how dangerous the job is and has become even more dangerous, I think, as a police officer. My wife is actually a police officer in the Met, so it kind of stops you in your tracks, you know, when you
Oh, yes.
when you see this, just two police officers on patrol approaching a man, a female police officer first. He allegedly, I should say, stabs her in the arm and then runs off. Her colleague gets a hold of him or tracks him down, and he attacks him as well. So
But it's a very serious wound in
very
her arm,
serious,
apparently.
potentially life-changing.
She's lost a
yeah.
lot of blood.
Yeah. And it's just it's terrifying, and I know that knife crime, particularly in the capital, is particularly bad, and it's just another example of the
We had
vital work
a
that the police
mother who emailed in yesterday on GBNEWS. She said she was the mother of two serving Met officers, and she said your blood freezes when you hear the news that, you know, there's been an incident and police people have been very seriously injured. She said, "All I can cling to is the fact that they would have rung me by now." But gosh, so the city life goes on, and there's still a problem to be.
It does, and they say, you know, that there's no suggestion that this was in any way linked to National Mourning or a terrorist incident. I think it just seems to have been, unfortunately, a random incident involving somebody obviously very dangerous carrying a weapon. But yeah, it's just, once politics gets back to normal next week, you know, this is the type of thing that the government's going to have to
It's got to be looked
focus
at.
on.
Well,
It really
to be
has.
calm, actually. It's got to really look at
Yes,
this,
they've
doesn't
got to
it?
come to grips with that.
Let's have a look at economic chaos in the eye, if we can, Claire. I mean, I suppose we have to keep a throttle and remind ourselves of what we're having to face as the weather gets colder, actually, and now our heating bills are going up. It's freezing this morning.
Yes, and this is unfortunate news for those with a mortgage, and it looks like it's going to increase due to the pound hitting a 37-year low. So the currency market has taken a massive battering, which is going to increase people's mortgage payments, and it could.
Why does that affect our mortgage payments?
It's all to do with the sort of the base rate of mortgages and percentage points, and normally a falling pound would increase inflation, but because our inflation is already increased, it's going to just hit interest rates even harder. It's one of these sort of very complicated fiscal events, and it looks to add around £700 a year onto a mortgage.
Onto the average mortgage?
Onto the average mortgage, which could be £60 a month increase. Yeah. Which is enormous when we're looking at costs going up for everything else, and especially with energy bills looking to raise by another sort of £200-300 a month for most people. Adding another £60-70 is just going to tip people over the edge. And it comes on to the 30-year anniversary of Black Wednesday, so it's all unfortunately history seeming to repeat itself, with the pound being at its lowest point for that time.
Haven't we got Kwasi Kwarteng doing sort of mini budget or whatever it's called for people on this Friday?
Yeah,
it better be good.
Well, I mean, under a lot of pressure. You know, they've said that they're going to cut tax. They say put more money in people's pockets, and that'll lead to economic growth. Well, it's a big gamble.
What's happening with this new price cap of £2,500? Has that gone through yet?
Yes.
Has that received approval in the House?
Well, that we're told doesn't need legislative approval. So that was the concern, that this was announced, if you remember, and then within hours the Queen died, and obviously politics just stopped, and everyone was wondering, well, hang on, does this mean that the energy package doesn't go ahead? But yeah, we're told, certainly for households, the business element of it is up in the air a little bit, but certainly for households, from October the 1st, this new cap is for 2 years is going to kick in. But you know, regardless, it's still energy bills are still going to be a lot higher than they were this time last year. And if the more you use, the more you pay.
Yeah, well, that's still higher than the energy cap, which comes into force on the 1st of October. So but at least it's going to stop it going up to whatever it might have done at one stage. But anyway, look, thank you both. Well, that's rather depressing news, really. Yeah. But there you go. We shall catch up with you both a little bit later on, Kevin and Claire.